Welcome to the VIP Value Innovation Pricing Vodcast, where we put value at the heart of every conversation. I'm your host, Karan Chiang, Chief Value Officer at Ibbaka, and today I'm excited to introduce the founder of Pricing Tribe, a community dedicated to helping pricing professionals perfect their craft, Karan Sood. Karan is a seasoned revenue management professional overseeing pricing and revenue strategies. As the Senior Director of Sales Operations at Rakuten Kubo, he leads pricing strategy, trade promotion, and sales strategy. Karan, thank you for being on our show today. I'm really looking forward to your insights. So let's just start with that very basic conversation around value. What does value mean in your world?
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me. Value in my mind and in our world, really in pricing people's world, I would say really means that something that you're delivering that has a monetary value attached to it that the person on the other side, which is a buyer, will benefit from. So you could be selling a software, you could be selling a service that in the end will create an impact on that other person's business, which is kind of the value that you're generating for that business. For example, if you are a scheduling software, you are scheduling sales calls, you're scheduling meetings, which will eventually turn into something tangible for that customer in terms of a new sales contract, new sales lead, or something. So it's basically what you deliver to get something in return that has, a value attached to it. Um, a monetary value, I would say, attached to it, or an emotional value attached to it.
And I know that for the consumer world, of course, economic value matters, but then you sort of touched on the economic value, which, of course, in the B2C space, emotional value drivers
Yeah.
really mean a lot as well. So maybe if you can share with us some real world case studies or stories or scenarios where we really have to dive into the economic value of things. And if you'd
Yeah.
like to, you can touch on the emotional side as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, tons of work that's been done in that frame, right? As you know, I'm a big fan of economic value analysis, where you find out what impact that product will have on the customer through more revenue, saving costs, saving time, saving risk, etc. Something, people are very familiar with in general. So I'll tell you an example of and this is I would say years ago, but at the same time, the concept is still fresh. So I used to work for Yellow Pages, which was primarily a printing company, and
Yes.
then the digitization happened, and we went into selling online products, and all of a sudden we had a search engine. So there's a
Hmm.
search engine, there's an app. I'm like, now what? So in the old world, it was very easy. There was a physical product. You could buy an ad in the directory, and it was easier to quantify. Like it was easy for people to show value. Here's the money, here's what will generate value for you. But in the online world, it's just a listing. So now we had this complicated task of how do you value these online products? How do you value your online presence? How do you value being on a search engine? And we were fortunate at that time. We were up against Google at that time, and they were starting to do their work on what cost per clicks and cost per acquisition actually looks like. So we had to go back and figure out how to calculate value for those ads. And the way we did it was, so for example, lawyers.
Hmm.
So I'll just go through almost like a checklist of how things were calculated. So you look at, okay, people are searching for lawyers. How many people are searching for lawyers? Then figuring out how many people are searching for lawyers, and then figuring out how many people are then clicking on these ads. So if someone bought an ad with us, how many people are clicking on those ads, and how many people are then visiting the website, and then how many people from the website are actually calling the customer. So we actually had to create a value chain where we could actually track people from the time they searched to the time
Yeah.
they visited someone's profile to the time they then called someone. And then we had to track all those calls to basically say, okay, we started to track calls and say, okay, this person called the plumber or the lawyer 15 times. or this number was called 15 times. Then we had to go back and figure out how many of those calls converted into business. So we had to basically then say, okay, half 15 of those calls, half of those calls converted into business for the customer. And then we had to figure out what is the value of each of those calls, because some calls were worth $1,000 to the customer and some calls were worth $5,000 for the customer. Then we had to come up with an average value per conversation. And so then we were able to calculate, okay, this ad leads to these many calls and will lead to this much in sales for the customer. So this is the value that is being delivered to the customer. Now our big hurdle is to figure out how much can we charge for this. We know how much value is being delivered. We are delivering $50,000 in revenue for the customer, but he's not going to pay 50,000. He may not even want to pay us 5,000. So what is that number? And to get to that, we had to sort of add research on top of it to get to that, to basically figure out what is the willingness to pay for that value. And then eventually we set up a bar that was higher than what the survey said, because we believe there's always a little bit of discrepancy of what people want to say and what they will pay for it. And then
Mhm.
we created a whole lot of value stories and collateral around it to basically say, here's why you should pay $2,000 a month so that you can deliver you $50,000 in value. And it's a way, so it's basically, value-based pricing to the T, where you're trying to all the way to the end customer, trying to figure out what the value was generated and how much will the customer pay for it. And and then over time, we try to raise the bar between what they were paying and how much value we were delivering by actually, having some price increases, figuring out where were we over delivering in value. If we were over delivering in value, then we got to figure out how to charge them a bit higher. When we're
Mhm.
under delivering in value, then we need to figure out how to either boost their presence or figure out a new creative way to price them so they don't feel like they're getting a terrible ROI. So, which in essence is what value-based pricing is, which is figuring out what the value is and charging accordingly so that you don't overcharge and you don't undercharge your customers either.
Okay, thank you for that, Karan. And I think one of the things that you mentioned, which I know that, a lot of the firms that we work with, it is really around understanding, as you say, your customer. And let's just sort of continue on with the Yellow Pages example. So, as you know, from an economic standpoint, there are different customer segments where certain segments of your customer will find higher value, whereas other customers would find, let's say, lower value. And I know that in our world, we've sort of looked at, hey, what if we were to do things like the value-based segmentation to then sort of derive the packages, right? Maybe you can talk a little bit more around how that was done, because
Yeah.
you say, the ad for say or say a Yellow Pages listing for and you talked about the professionals, the lawyers, versus a listing for, as you say, a plumber,
Yeah.
or right. It's and I sort of think
No,
about.
no, so I get where you're going with this, and which is a good point because that actually happens. So there are like 3,000 type of businesses out there,
That's right.
right? And every business has a different value. And now everyone wants to be online, everyone wants to advertise, etc. But the value that customer derives from each of these conversations or sales or clicks is different. For example, 5 clicks to a lawyer are worth a lot.
Hmm.
That could be 5 potential clients that could pay you $5,000 in retainer. But
Hmm.
five clicks to a shoe repair guy down the street is nothing. It's basically worth maybe $150 in business. So we had to segment almost 3,000 businesses on their willingness, on their value that they're generating and willingness to pay for that sort of a value. So your top tier businesses like plumbers, general contractors, lawyers, insurance agents, because where the value of
Hmm.
that lead is a lot higher. It's like tens of thousands of dollars. And we could charge in line with that value. So the product was segmented the same way. So they would get the top tier placements, which are worth a lot more, but also generate a lot of value. And then you have your second, third, and fourth and fifth tier businesses, and those will be the people who businesses that have low contract value, let's put it that way, or low customer value. So your, as I said, shoe repair, dry cleaners, that where the average transaction is lower. So that needs to reflect in the product. So the products were designed in that way. So you can almost say that's an extension of good, better, best. For you, there's probably a little bit more tiers to it, which is more like value, good, better, premium. So we had like five different tiers that would correspond with five different sort of segments of customers. And that's one layer.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's another layer to it, which is so a geo layer to it. And this is where, lot of value-based pricing comes down to in terms of like there's this, segmentation comes down to, so there's the value that's based on the business, then there's a value based on the city, because a lawyer in Toronto is lead in Toronto is worth more than if it was sometime somewhere in like Paris, Ontario, that has a population of 1,000 versus somewhere there's a population of like 2.3 million. So there again, now the added element of segmentation by the city. So there's segmentation by business and then by the city. So there's an added layer there. So which again sort of had some products were only available to top tier cities because of the nature of the kind of product, and some products were only geared towards smaller and low population cities in general. So that's how they would get segmented. It's sort of fell in place when you look at it, broadly.
Mm-hmm. So I think the other exciting thing in that example as well is that you did talk about the value chain, right? And being able to really track that interaction and engagement from the value chain. Is there anything else that you can sort of share with our viewers regarding the value chain? As you know, for us, we've done a lot of work in the customer value journey map. So essentially, it's the journey map, but really layering the value from that. And I thought that example that you brought up on the value chain and in being able to sort of track, the leads to then actually get to point of sale, is something that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of goodness in that conversation happens when you not only quantify it, but you show it. I think the
Mhm.
showing part is what a lot of businesses miss. And they'll go and write an email about how good their product is and how much value sector they delivers. But when you actually, as you said, and show it in a value chain, or you show it in a value summary, in a value infographic, or however you want to quantify and show it, the conversation changes. A lot of people won't realize the value that a service is delivering for them until you sit down and write down the value story and write down all the value proposition and then quantify them and then show them in a manner that the other customer understands, whether that's a quantifiable table, or that's a pie chart, or it's a donut, like however you want to quantify and show it makes a world of difference between uh, a good and a bad sale from a value based selling perspective. A lot of
Mhm.
time what happens is people will touch on the emotional and qualitative element of the product, that this product is amazing, this product does this much, this product does 30% better this, but they don't actually quantify it. What does it really mean? And
Mhm.
one that's rarely missed, but very, very, very frequently missed is, so when a lot of people in a lot of services and SaaS tools and softwares will say, we saved you time.
Mhm.
Okay, then what? You saved me 10 hours, then what? Then what do I do with those 10 hours? What can people do with 10 hours? Can they go and make more sales? Can they go and, create more, clear more backlog? Can they do better customer service? It's all worth something, but we miss that point. People make that claim, we save time, but save time has to be worth something that I think a lot of businesses in general don't do. And I think this is a problem with value-based pricing that we don't do enough quantification of value. We talk about value-based pricing a lot, and I think sometimes people intend to quantify, but they don't. And I think it just shows in the kind of real world examples we see on a daily basis where, I have in my lifetime bought a lot of software, and I don't think so I've ever seen a good pitch for value-based selling ever that where someone came out and said, "Hey, I understand your value drivers. I understand how value will be delivered to you. Let me quantify it." There are
Hmm.
attempts to it, but never, I wouldn't say I've ever seen really good work around it. I think one of the reasons is because when you start to calculate value and you show value, people get uncomfortable with the number. For
Hmm.
example, if I was any service provider and I was providing a service and I said, okay, the value delivered is 3 million. A lot of people feel uncomfortable with that number, that how am I going to go and say out 3 million of value delivered? Maybe it's not 3 million, maybe it's 2 million, maybe it's a million. Maybe it is. But at the same time, if you don't put it out there for a conversation, you'll probably miss what might be true, for example, from a value perspective.
Hmm. Yeah, and I would agree with you, Karan, that it's a still a very nascent type
Yeah.
of mindset for organizations. I mean, value-based uh, s- methodologies mean different things for different people. So as you know, I
Yeah.
mean, we have customers which, claim that they do value-based methodologies, but when you dig deeper, the ability to really quantify, as you say, maybe put it this way, a bit lacking. But then I think also it's very tough to really, how to say, justify those claims and measurements as well. And agree with you, which is, value is something that evolves over time. And it's a partnership with your prospect and customer, something that you have to always test and work in partnership
Yeah.
to,
I,
how to
I, I,
say, make better.
I think you make a very good point about continuous testing and continuous quantification, because a lot of time people think of it as once and done.
That's right.
Like you made, and I think that's the problem with the sales cycle of B2B services and software in general is this, that the person who makes a sale and does the initial work around value will be different than the person who then makes the renewal in year two. And there's a disconnect. There's some conversations here, but those value conversations don't get
Mhm.
updated, or they don't get brought back into the fold for renewal, because you could be delivering more value by year two that you didn't quantify, but you're still having a hard time getting the renewal because
Yeah.
you're not talking about value enough.
That's right. I think, as you say, that ability to how to say, carry forward that value conversation, and as you use the term value stories, which is a term that Ibbaka actually had
Yeah,
also utilized and come up with, to
yeah,
define essentially, hey, what is the story that you really put around
yeah.
the value drivers and that conversation to then come up with that consistent method.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, you guys and Steven and everyone have done a pretty good job of putting your content out there and just telling the story of value-based pricing as it should be. Not a lot of purists out there with that philosophy. So,
Mhm.
those to you guys.
Okay. So, in terms of innovations, so let's sort of shift to innovations. So I know that everyone is talking about the AI innovation. You can either choose to comment on that, but I think that AI has been here, and we've had a number of people talk about how, I mean, as you said, Stephen Forth, our other founder at Ibbaka, has uh, has talked a lot about how AI is even shifting our world in value and pricing. But what other innovations do you really see transforming the work that we do?
I think. I think set aside AI for a second because everyone talks about it. We know what AI is doing is supercharging everyone's work, it's making things easier, it's making, that's a given. But I think what AI is also giving and what's happening right now is the innovation in models. Like model, when I say in pricing models, where people are rethinking what pricing could be. What previously was like, okay, this is a seat-based SaaS pricing, for example, you're only charging per user, regardless of how your product is being used, is been rethought right now. So that development is now happening, which is the second wave of pricing almost. I said the first wave of pricing happened when Salesforce went in and said, okay, no more big ticket $1 million installation. We're going to charge by the user and we're going to have a subscription for software and services. And that was the first wave, you know. And now the second wave is like, okay, you no longer want to price by the user alone. There are new metrics you want to price by. And I think that has happened because of people are looking at new possibilities of how to monetize. There's also AI into this mix a little bit to figure out, okay, there's new things possible with AI, and also how value is being measured now is
Mhm.
probably different from how value was being measured almost 2 years ago. And I think that's making a step change in how people will perceive. So the innovation is happening in the model. So where, consumption was not being discussed, hybrid was not being discussed, outlook pricing was not outlook output-based pricing or outcome-based pricing was not being discussed. It's now being discussed. So I think the innovation is happening in the model per se, and that could be driven by several factors, including AI. But I think there's right now the industry is going through this movement where they're saying, okay, pricing could be different. So, and any company who's sort of looking at it that way is probably going to be on the beneficial side of this wave when we come on the other side, and who have rethought their pricing models, who rethought their costing models based on that, are going to be in a pretty good space in a year or 2 years from now. So I think
Good.
that's a big, apart from the regular thing that AI has done, which is like, make pricing professionals' job easier, but also challenging because now a lot of stuff that pricing people could pride themselves in, which is competitive monitoring and, mm, you know,
Mhm. Yeah.
making value statements and, creating value models are gonna get a little bit more easier with AI. So that's a given, which I know you guys already know. But so there's that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Karan. I think that the real opportunity here is that close-knit integrations and partnerships with your customers to actually track, as you say, the outcomes. So the
Yeah,
acceleration of being able to elaborate and test on those models, I think
yeah,
will be
yeah,
something to be
yeah,
transformative. Okay,
100%.
so in terms of, I guess my next question is, what are your top recommendations for our viewers? What is it that our viewers can start doing today?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke about that recently in another, I think, in another post or something that, obviously a lot is happening in this space, and a lot of people are now figuring out what do you do, what do you learn, etc. I mean, I would still give people time. These things will have a long cycle. We'll be in this AI space for the next many, many years. So even if you haven't started working on it, it's not too late. There's time. I think the basic place where a lot of people who are in the space can start if they're looking into AI and AI's impact on pricing and on anything in general. I think the one thing that they can start is um, and Andrew Ng um, has a course out there on Coursera called AI for Everyone, and he is probably one of the leading authorities on AI globally right now. And I think his course is designed towards people to open their mind about how AI is to be used, what the limitations are, how you should use it, what the use cases are. Because I think a lot of pricing people in the future will have to think through how to integrate AI into their work and how
Mhm.
to integrate, you know, for them for value modeling, how to integrate them, how AI governance will work, what they will use it for, what they can't use it for, and just competitive monitoring, like all sort of stuff that they need to do. I
Mhm.
think there's a responsibility on the part of pricing people to do it well, and I think that starts with understanding what the limitations of the technology are. Because a lot of people right now, and you probably know, are blindly following what ChatGPT gives them or what an AI models gives them or Perplexity gives them without actually diving deep into, is it right or is it wrong? Is it hallucinating? Is it making up data? So I think you have to understand what each model does, what the limitations of each model are, what's to be used for competitive monitoring, what's to be used for financial analysis or quantitative analysis, and what models are suitable for. I think understanding that is key. So start with Andrew Ng's AI for Everyone course. The other one I say, and I strongly recommend people, is to start building something.
Mm.
Um, right now, with these low code tools like Lovable, etc., people can start to experiment in their day-to-day pricing processes and work. If you have a pricing process at work that is pretty mundane, is pretty archaic, is pretty, manual, I would go open an account on Lovable and start creating a what that process could look like if it was automated. And it has never been more easier than ever. You don't need to know. I mean, it would be beneficial to have knowledge of SQL and R and code, but at the same time, it's not mandatory. You can start building something without that knowledge and sort of reverse engineer that. And I see a lot of people building that stuff for processes at different companies that I've spoken with, and it's better than nothing. It's better than not doing and watching from the sidelines, is what I would say. The best way to learn is to build something. So start building, I guess. That would be my other.
Thanks, Karen.
Um,
It seems like I should reach out to Andrew and perhaps have him on the show as well.
oh, he's definitely probably the best authority on it right now.
Anyway, so thank you very much for that advice, Karan. I know that Ibbaka has obviously been utilizing a number of AI tools itself, and I'm sure we'll have a few announcements to make in
Amazing.
very near future. But that brings us to the end of this episode of our Value Innovation Pricing Vodcast. So a huge thank you to Karan again for sharing his expertise, his stories, experience, and practical wisdom. As highlighted, I think we are talking about how value and pricing are really, really powerful levers. And these are levers for not only growth, resilience, and lasting customer impact, but especially as we see the advent of AI and shifts that are happening in terms of the ability to integrate and with data, that we can become even stronger collaborative partners with our customers to really enforce the value chain and what we're creating for them. So if you've enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, give us feedback, and share our vodcasts with your network. And if there are topics that you'd like to explore, connect with me at Ibbaka or via LinkedIn. But thank you very much for tuning in. And remember that value is core, innovate for value, and price for value. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.